Yeah.
The next topic we're going to see is the female reproductive system. We're going to talk first about its functions and its parts, its organs, and then we're going to talk about the processes it helps with. So, the first organ, from top to bottom, is the fallopian tubes. The fallopian tubes' function is to carry eggs or oocytes from the ovaries to the uterus. The fallopian tubes also play an important part in the role of fertilization. The next organ is the ovaries. The ovaries help store the eggs or oocytes, as I mentioned, until they are ready to be released. Another function of the ovaries is to produce female sex hormones, such as progesterone and estrogen. The third organ from a list of 8 organs is the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder's function is to store urine coming from the kidneys until the person goes through the process of urination. Then, the fourth organ is the uterus. The uterus helps develop the embryo after implantation. Implantation is a process we're going to talk about in a little bit. The number 6 in our list is the cervix. Here you can see the cervix is just below the uterus, and the cervix function is to allow blood from menstruation coming from the uterus to the outside of the body. But the cervix also directs sperm from a male into the uterus, from the vagina into the uterus. So it helps with fertilization. Now, the fifth one of our list is the urethra. As you can see in this image, the urethra is connected to the urinary bladder. And as you can imagine, the urethra's function is to carry urine from the urinary bladder to the outside of the body in urination. Okay, we're almost done. The 7th organ is the vagina. The vagina serves as a passage, as you can see, for menstrual blood, cervical mucus, and menstrual fluids to the outside of the body. Finally, as in number 8, we have the rectum. The rectum doesn't take part in pregnancy, implantation, or fertilization. It only serves as temporary storage for feces until they leave the body through the anus. Like I said before, first we talk about the organs and functions, and now we're going to talk about its processes. We're going to start with the basics first. To know how the oocyte is transported from the ovaries to the uterus, first we have to know what an oocyte is and where it is produced. So, in the female, the gonads, anagram, in charge of producing the gametes, is the ovaries. The ovaries function, like I mentioned and I hope you learned, is to produce eggs and sex hormones. But we're going to talk about just the eggs. Another word for the eggs is the oocyte. The process in which the ovary produces oocytes is called oogenesis. Usually, one single oocyte is produced every month, and then ovulation happens. Ovulation is a process in which the oocyte is released from the ovaries and travels down the fallopian tube to the uterus, as you can see here. Once the oocyte is released, it is only viable for 24 hours. That is, it means that it can only work for fertilization for 24 hours. If it is not fertilized until then it doesn't work anymore. The last 2 processes of the female reproductive system are fertilization and implantation. After the egg has traveled down to the fallopian tube and has been fertilized in those 24 hours, it is called fertilization. Now, when the egg is fertilized, it is called a zygote. The zygote then travels down to the uterus and embeds itself in it, and that is called implantation. And that concludes it with the female reproductive system. We've already talked about what's inside and what happens inside, and now we're going to talk about what's outside. So, in this illustration, the woman is laying on her back and her legs are open. So, here we can see from top to bottom, but in reality, we're making our way from the anterior part of her to the posterior part of her. So, first is the mons pubis. Here it's very self-explanatory. It's not the genitalia, it's just the skin. It's a part of the skin. Now, we have the prepuce of the clitoris, and just under it, we have the clitoris. The clitoris is the only organ in the whole female body that's only designed to give pleasure. It doesn't serve for anything else. Now we have two labia, the labia majora, the outside part of it, and the labia minora, which is these two labia. Here, the labia minora helps protect the external uterine orifice. Now, like I mentioned before, in the female reproductive system, the urethral orifice, the urethra helps carry urine from the urinary bladder to the outside of the body in urination. Then we have the vaginal opening. Like I mentioned before, in the last image, we have the vagina that leads to the cervix, and the cervix leads to the uterus. The next one is the posterior. We've already talked about what's inside and what happens inside, and now we're going to talk about what's outside. So, in this illustration, the woman is laying on her back and her legs are open. So, here we can see from top to bottom, but in reality, we're making our way from the anterior part of her to the posterior part of her. So, first is the mons pubis. Here it's very self-explanatory. It's not the genitalia, it's just the skin. It's a part of the skin. Now, we have the prepuce of the clitoris, and just under it, we have the clitoris. The clitoris is the only organ in the whole female body that's only designed to give pleasure. It doesn't serve for anything else. Now, we have two labia, the labia majora, the outside part of it, and the labia minora, which is these two labia. Here, the labia minora helps protect the external uterine orifice. Now, like I mentioned before, in the female reproductive system, the urethral orifice, the urethra helps carry urine from the urinary bladder to the outside of the body in urination. Then we have the vaginal opening. Like I mentioned before, in the last image, we have the vagina that leads to the cervix, and the cervix leads to the uterus. The next one is the posterior.
So now we're going to talk about hypothalamus and pituitary gland. So first of all, hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is a part of a brain that helps maintaining homeostasis, and it makes regulates hunger, sleep, stress, body temperature, and water balance. Another thing is that it produces hormones that it controls pituitary glands, such as hypothalamic and inhibitory hormones. So the next one is pituitary gland. The hormones of pituitary glands regulate the functions from endocrine glands. So it is divided in two, anterior and posterior. So hormones are chemicals that carry message from one cell to another through your bloodstream. So we continue with ovarian cycle. Ovarian cycle incorporates a progression of occasions that happens amid and after the development of an oocyte. That if you remember what is an oocyte, it's an egg. So the next one is uterine cycle. So uterine cycle includes a progression of change in the endometrium of the uterus to set it up entry of a fertilized egg that will create there until birth. Finally, the variant uterine cycle and hormonal change, they are known as a female reproductive system. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone, this over here, this one is soft tissue, controls the cycles by stimulating. Follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, this over here, from the anterior pituitary gland. So the length of the female regenerative cycle regularly extends from 24 or 34 days.
Now we're going to talk about the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is this small part in our brain. It's actually really surprising how that small part of our brain actually controls most of our sexual interactions and hormonal change in our bodies. First of all, the hypothalamus is a really small part. It is even smaller than the pituitary gland, and it is in charge of creating some hormones, in charge of our emotional behaviors and sexual arousal behaviors as well. Now, in the next slide, we're gonna talk about the pituitary gland. As we can see, it's a really smaller percent than the previous one, which was a hypothalamus. They're actually really nearby, and the surprising thing about this is that between both, the most important one is the pituitary gland, because they release hormones that control extensively our whole body. Now, we're going to talk about what hormones are in charge during the sexual reproduction in males. The first one is the gonadotropin release hormones, also as in GnRH. They're mainly found, they are created in the hypothalamus, which is the other part. They're in charge of regulating our body temperature, and they're in charge of releasing and stimulating our growth. The next one is the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, FSH and LH. They are found in the pituitary gland, and as the name suggested, they are in charge of our normal body released liquids, which is blood, spermatozoids, and other liquids. And they're also in charge of our hair. They're in charge of rejuvenizing our hair, and usually when a person gets old, that hormone is less likely to be active and around 70 years old. So you can see in 70-year-old, if you take a DNA test or hormonal test in your case, that the follicle gland, their follicle hormone is really missing in their age. The next one is estrogen and testosterone, which are considered the main hormones in charge of our sexual and reproductive system. They're found in the gonads, which are testes and the adrenal gland. They're also produced in the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus, but they're produced the most in the testes and the adrenal gland. We also need to be focused on how these hormones are controlled, because without control, they're just hormones and they can actually mess up how our body reacts to them. They're actually controlled by a negative feedback loop system. They're in charge of the trigonal loop system, which is basically control hormones. They're found in our brain as well. And when the hormone levels in our body actually skyrockets, they're in charge of releasing certain amino acids that contra-react their hormones. But this process is a negative feedback loop system. The negative feedback loop system is negative, and this can affect our body. So in many birth control methods, they affect our hormones, which in case actually produce this kind of feedback loop system. And it's actually dangerous for our body. Too many hormonal changes in our body can affect our brains, our attitude, how our body reacts, and even our muscles and bones structures. So we actually have to be really careful when talking about hormones and what kind of birth control we are using.